Okay, yeah, welcome back. Just noticed the trews, his leggings, they're the same colour as the tunic. So look, we're lucky. We've still got the paint still wet. So there's not much of them showing, but that's probably why I forgot them. So just in there, there's a tiny bit of water. And I thought that the coordination this chap chose in his choice of clothing for the big battle, the great slaughter, you know, if you're going to die, you might as well die looking good. So, right, the trousers there. Now, the colour I chose for the leggings, the puttees, leg wraps, whatever people call them, I thought I'd use quite a snazzy colour, because the other colours there are kind of like slightly muted. But, you know, let's just dive in. And again, a small amount of black will mix in here. Okay. All right, if you can see there, small amount of black. All right, black ink, as I say. I never darken things with black paint, only ever use black ink. It just seems to work, and it's so... Yeah, I don't know. When you give it a go, you let me know what you think. Okay, so a darkened down cavalry brown in there. And again, with these leg wraps, the detail is quite fine, you know, in between each wrap. So be cautious you don't gunk it up, because when you put your ink, which will be the next thing that you do when it comes to doing these leg wraps, you want it to be able to flow into all of those fine cuts there. So you don't have to then go in there with a 3-0 brush and kind of paint them in and they don't exist. So anyway, always do the backs. All right, so there are the leg wraps. Right, at the moment, that's what we've got. And you know what, I've just think what I'll do, something I enjoy doing, I'm going to do the leatherwork now, because there's nothing else there. If I do the leatherwork, I'm going to ruin the leatherwork. So yeah, what I'll do the leather. Right, what have I got? Now, I don't know about you, most people don't have these in their paint kits. You know, they're like craft paints, but I've found a variety of these paints that just seem to work almost perfectly. Look, you've got 3 different shades. Don't know if you can see there. Okay, and we'll start off obviously with the darkest, and I won't have to darken it down, but this basically just gives us a you know, the base coat to then build from. But what I like about these is, look, you can just, if you want to, you can just open those up and they kind of lean towards you, which are quite handy little paints. Right, so right, the shoes. Right, okay. I mean, every painter will have his own kind of way that he does things. All things just continually change. There's no rhyme or reason really to the way you tackle a figure, apart from obviously the larger areas first, and the more finely detailed areas you leave till last, because you're changing your brushes over to the really, really fine brushes. Right, so there's a small amount of a scabbard down there. Right, he's got a bag, some kind of utility bag there. Okay, he's also got, yes, so you can see the equipment that these guys have around the belt. It's always interesting, because there's combinations of different things, from the, presumably the money pouch, or the place where he's got his trinkets, his earwax kind of pokers and things like that Vikings seem to be. We see them in the museums, or his comb, and then you've got, it isn't a sax, it's more of a kind of a hunting knife kind of thing there. And then we're in, and boom, boom. Now onto the strap of the baldric that holds his sword. Take it down there. Boom, 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 boom. Now, on this figure, I actually sculpted, you've got like little leather reinforcements on the sleeves and at the the bottom of the chainmail shirt or hauberk or burney or whatever you want to call it. Okay, so anyway, look, we've just got the first layer of the leather tones. The next one we're going to use is this. So let's get this one out. As I said again, I like these because you don't have to squirt anything onto your palette. You just straight out of the tub, and look, you can reach in there nice and easy. Okay, right, so might look like I'm actually going completely over the darker coat, but that darker coat was really to act as a kind of like a springboard from the black, because if you were to paint it this colour straight onto black, it just would have kind of like smeared over the top and it wouldn't have really held. So, right, and now, highlight there, there. Sometimes I do this, instead of doing one stroke, I just touch it a few times, just slightly from the side, and that just seems to give you a little bit more control. You less chance of you spilling over and going onto your chainmail, which you really don't want to do at this stage. All right, just again, touch, 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 touch. And there's that little bit of the belt wrap there, and the straps that hold this together, hold the hunting knife onto the waist belt. Right, okay. Right, I like that. Now, if you can see in there, just give this. Again, you're not going to see it because the shield's going to be there, but look, you can see it looks quite good. Now, I'm not going to do my final or next but last shade on that until I get some ink in there just to differentiate the different parts of what's going on down there, from the straps holding the hunting knife and the pouch, etc., etc. So what I'll do now, I think we'll go into a little bit of shading. Now, there's a very, very strange thing I picked up. I thought I was picking up matte black. And it's not matte black, it's actually black glaze. And when I first tried to put it to undercoat a figure, I thought, what the heck is this? This must be something's gone wrong with it. But it's got some interesting properties. So if I was to use ink to shade, quite often it's difficult to direct where that ink goes. I mean, it's good because it flows into some of those creases and things like that. But it can also, in some areas like this, you know, it will just cling to the tiniest little indent in there, and it won't give you a broader kind of shade from the folds in the cloak. So what this is, it's slightly, is the word, translucent. So I'm not going to use it straight. I'm just going to water it down a bit. Now let's see if we can see what happens in here. So, right, you see there, and then in here. Right, I think you can see there. Now we're going to go into these areas. Right, this is obviously your sharpest one. And you know what? To take some of the pigment off, I'm just going to wipe it on there, just so it's not too intense. There, and just in here. You've got an interesting little crease down there. And then I'm also going to just push it into where the different clothing layers are, because you need to differentiate those so they don't blend into one, just to show that they're different clothing items. Right, now that worked quite well because this arm is bent at a good right angle. This crease is quite an important one. Okay, there. Now probably the most important ones, again because it's close to the face, are those ones in here. So there's 1, 2, 1 round there. Okay, now I'm going to even have a go at pushing this in and around where I've got my leather things here. So we've got a bag in there, and then we've got the gap between the two straps of the hunting knife. So that's got to be shaded, that's got to be shaded. And where the knife goes close to the pouch, yes. there. And guess what? I've just forgotten I haven't done the leather on these and this. So I'm going to change over brushes. I think that's the first time in this painting session I've changed over the brushes, but I'll be back in a second. Right, welcome back. So I say we've got these very fine bits of detail here at the bottom and at the edges of the sleeves, the half sleeves. So I've changed now brushes for the first time, and this is the Insane Detail. It's not the finest brush in the Army Painter range, but it's exactly the kind of brush that you need for doing the not the finest detail, but your fine details, if that makes sense. So first of all, we'll get that base kind of dark colour. Right, now, right, let's just go along there now. The reason why you do sometimes see the chainmail kind of edged with leather, I mean, there's discussion on why they do it, but it seems pretty obvious. It's to protect either chafing those animated areas of the hips or the arms from the rubbing of the metal through the tunic, cotton, whatever it is, wool. And it just means that that chainmail shirt is going to be more comfortable for the person who's moving around, and especially if he's moving around quickly and there's lots of movement, rustling and things like that with the chainmail. So got that there. Right, now this is quite a difficult part to reach. So I'm resting my hand, my little finger, on a part of the model that isn't going to be painted. Okay, so nothing can really go wrong there, but enables me just to get that wrist action and a bit of pressure on there, which just keeps my paintbrush away and a lot more controllable. So, right, that didn't take too long, did it? Okay, so now I'll just give the highlights to those areas. Right, this part, obviously, same as the tunic highlight, just a tiny bit. Now there's not going to be too many highlights when it comes to leather because it doesn't have the folds, but it does need highlights, and I mean you'll see at the end of the day. So right, this where the belt comes through the buckle right on the tip, and then where the belt gets looped through, you can see there and just there. The hip area, I might have already done that. Sometimes if you use the same paint twice in the same area, it actually highlights it because the first layer you put on there kind of gets, it's only one layer, then the second one builds on that and it actually gives you a double highlight. It's a bit difficult to explain, but right. And here we'll just, instead of stroking, we'll just touch. So boom, 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 boom. Because if I'd have tried to pull that, I could have gone into there or onto there. So just by touching it, it works quite well. And the straps, right. Yep. Yeah, nailed that. Now with this hunting knife, I've given it just a little bit of a reinforcement around there. So I just want to kind of grab that. Yeah, that's not too bad. And a tiny little buckle or some closure on the bag where it hangs onto the belt. I'm pretty happy with that. Okay, let me just go down to the shoes again. Boom, 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 boom. Now we're going to change over to a different brush, and this is the Psycho. Okay, right, this is the absolute tiniest brush in the range, and that's because we're going to do, I mean, when we talk about highlights, we're talking about the absolute most minuscule, tiny little highlights on this leather. Right, so you can see how thin that tip is, right? Just here, maybe a bit there, this bag is. Look, you can see just one there, one there. Right, let's have a little look. The straps, I'm not going to redo the straps, but I'm just going to touch where the straps touch the main part of the leather. Because if I was to redo that again, I mean, you wouldn't have two highlights, you just have the you know, just one streak of paint again. So I'm just touching it there now. If you're really feeling bold, you can attempt to do a few lines right there on the handle of the knife, just to give this impression of the leather thong that's been wrapped around it. So, boom. Yeah, I think that works. Again, tiniest little piece right on the belt where it's just coming from the... Problem with this Psycho brush is it's so thin, and you know, when you're using matte colours, the colour dries so quick, you don't have much time to get the paint on, get it off. So, yes, I'm really pleased with that. Okay, you can see right in there. Okay, now a couple of little more dots just right on the end there. Maybe too much. So sometimes I just bring my finger on there, just press it down, and a bit there, and perhaps a tiny bit there. I'm going to get rid of that and go back to this brush. Right, okay, so we've got that there, I think that works quite well. Okay, I forgot to do on these shoes. There you are. Last bit before we finish off on the leather work. Boom, 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 boom. Last tiny little bit. Just the lighter part with the shoe joins there. You can see I've used too much there, so I'm just going to go down probably to the darkest colour and just measure that in, and that's looking pretty good. You know what? Let's just go back to the Psycho once more. Just bear with me. Just saw something I like the idea of. Right here, where you've got the curve of that knife, be great if we could just capture that. Yeah, I think that'll do. Right, let's have a look at what we got now. So, there we are. Okay,